are just over a week from officially kicking off Louisiana's 2024 high school football season, and our Louisiana vs. All Y'all preview series, plural, are rolling right along. Thanks so much for checking out the channel. Make sure you take a second and hit that subscribe button below. I'm Jarrett Roser, and I teamed up with a group of great high school sports reporters from a range of print, television, radio, and digital backgrounds from 10 different regions around the state to share their perspectives as we ramp up the action and the content. Hopefully you may have already had a chance to check out the Class 1A, 2A, 3A, and 4A videos because here we are, it's 5A time. Note that these class-by-class rundowns will not be the only preview content dropping on Louisiana vs. All Y'all before Week 1, so stay tuned. But for now, let's toss to our good friend Jake Martin of the Ouachita Citizen to lead us off with the reigning Division I non-select champion Ruston Bearcats and that increasingly awesome District 2 5A.
It's probably one of my favorite districts in the state from afar, where now Neville joins the mix of what has been a great district already. And so the Northeast Louisiana teams there with Neville, West Monroe, Ruston, Ouachita, as well as Alexandria and Pineville down at CenLa. There's, storylines abound there with the reigning champions of the Bearcats, Neville joining the 5A group, and West Monroe and Ouachita always strong. What are you seeing from this group as the season approaches?
I love this district too, Jared. I think if you polled most people, the Catholic League would probably be number one for most. But I think this has a really good argument for number two, just in terms of when you look at the quality of the teams, when you look at the storylines. A lot of, you being here, it's kind of interesting because when you were here, West Monroe was running that district. And it was always kind of the storyline of, can Ruston break through or can Ouachita break through? For years, West Monroe had these long win streaks over these schools. You can throw Neville in the mix too, even though Neville's been 2-4A. West Monroe's had, a win streak that went back to 1995 that ended in 2021. So all of these streaks have ended, and Ruston won the district last year. Ruston finally broke through, won the district, won the state championship. And so now it's interesting to me, Jarrett, because a lot of West Monroe fans are getting a little antsy. They're like, hey, man, we used to run this thing. Now we're chasing Ruston. And how close are we to, competing for a district title? And then, Ouachita is like a little sleeper in the district. I like what they have coming back. A lot of people know about Dylan Berryman, across the state because he's blown up recruiting-wise. But they've got a guy in A.J. Washington right next to him that combined for over 600 pounds on the defensive line. And they've been playing since they were freshmen. They're juniors now. And then you got Neville entering the fray, and I like a lot about Neville going into this year. But yeah, man, it's going to be a lot of fun because when you look at West Monroe and Neville specifically, they have new quarterbacks. I think that's the biggest question is, okay, what are they going to look like at quarterback? Because there's a lot of other pieces about both those teams that I really like. And then Ruston is like the flip opposite of last year, where the defense had to kind of carry them. The defense was stacked, and all those guys are gone now. LSU, Louisiana Tech, Tulane. It's a star-studded group that they have to replace. And so how good are they going to be defensively? Aiden Anding is back. He's going to be kind of the ringleader there. Zarek Hill as well. But the offense might have to carry the defense early on. And, of course, Joshua Brantley's really come on and is a Tulane commit at quarterback. A lot of people saw him in the Dome. And he just progressively got better. And so I'm anxious to see Ruston, are they relying on the offense early on?
You've got Alexandria, who came together as the season went along last year and was kind of peaking at the right time to make a deep playoff run. They and Pineville are in the mix with a lot of those Northeast Louisiana teams, the Monroe-based teams, and a reigning state champion in Ruston. When you look at that group, and I think probably particularly those Ash Trojans, what are you seeing from some of the potential of the 5A schools from your region of the state?
Yeah, I really feel like of those the 5A teams that we have here, I feel like Ash is probably the best one for sure. Not just only of the 5A schools, but also of all the teams that we have here in CenLa. Got a chance to see them on Wednesday, and they look like a well-oiled machine. Obviously, JT Lindsay, the LSU commit, he looks pretty good. They're going to have a good offensive line around him, so that's going to give him the opportunity to make plays. But they also got other players like Darius Washington, a receiver that can also break loose and make some plays as well. And they have a solid defense that can do the same thing. Maybe the only question mark that they may have is that quarterback. obviously with a sophomore battle, trying to figure out who's going to become the quarterback there and who's going to get their first reps and being quarterback, and especially against a very, very tough schedule that starts off with Acadiana during the scrimmage and Sterlington during the jam and everything. But I think that this is the team to beat with so many skill players and also good players as well, role players as well, that can really get them to at least a deep run in the playoffs once again.
Do you look at going into this season as it's Ruston's district to win and everybody's trying to chase them now, or is it kind of with everything that they replace? Yeah, I was going to ask, or the flip side, is it kind of wide open with all those losses to the defense?
Well, here's the interesting thing. I think, yes, I think it's Ruston's district to win. I think they should be the favorite. They are the favorite. I think they got a good chance to compete for a state title. I think they're that good. But you're right. There are some questions about the defense. And then, I think West Monroe, maybe some people are not thinking about West Monroe, and I'm talking about statewide as much just because they got upset in the first round last year. It kind of feels like a long time ago that West Monroe was really this power. Even though, I go back to 2018, Jarrett, they could have won that state title against Zachary. That would have changed a lot of history because that team was unbeaten and really, really good. But anyway, they didn't. Chris Hilton happened. And so they lost that game. And, it is what it is. But when you look at going into the season, I think West Monroe and Neville have a chance to be really good. I think West Monroe's, honestly, they're like a junior-led team. I think their year is going to be next year. But I think it's important for them to have a big run in the playoffs this year. They can't have what happened last year repeat itself. Neville, if I really knew, Parker Robinson was St. Frederick's quarterback. Andy Robinson was the head coach. He got hired over at Neville, and so his son, Parker Robinson, came over with him. Really good, talented young quarterback, but we didn't even see him play that much quarterback at St. Frederick, and now he's going to the deep end. And so, he's not even the starter. He's competing with Brock Jordan. That's a competition still going on. And so, very interested, what's going to happen at quarterback, because I do think up front they'll be solid. I like their running backs. I like their receivers. And forgive me, I'm jumping all over the place. But I just think, Neville's secondary could be one of the best in the state. When it comes to, I'm sure other teams might have more 5 stars or whatever, but they got a guy in Julian Burns, who I know has SEC offers. But they have really good high school players too that have played a lot of football, including Robert Graves. You've got Cam Riley, who's committed to the Cajuns. You've got Juju Burns with all these different SEC offers, and Mike Collins says, no, our best football player is Robert Graves. So it's like, wow, when he said that really stood out to me. But my point there is they're going to be really, really solid at every single level of defense. Mike Collins is a great defensive coach. I love their skill. I think they're solid up front, and I really like the running backs. But the quarterback's a pretty big deal, man. If we don't know what Neville has at quarterback, it's kind of hard to predict how good Neville can be. And Neville fans are like, hey, y'all might be counting us out, but last year we should have beat Ruston. We had the state champions on the ropes. We had a special teams miscue, and they ended up taking advantage of it and beating us. But we had them. We had them on the ropes. And so they're really confident going into the new District 2-5A too.
And I know there's not going to be any shying away from anything or adjustment period for Neville fans' eyes, who, just like West Monroe, they expect to compete for championships every year. Most of the teams in this district, they've been playing, whether non-district or jamboree or whatever the fashion, they see those guys every year anyway and expect to compete with anyone. And then obviously these last couple of years with the Division I playoff breakdown. So there's not going to be any patience there expecting to wait around. With that 4-5A district that had 2 teams that we were watching in December in the Dome, a state champion in Catholic and a state runner-up in Zachary High, and I know both will expect to be contenders again this year, and that district has continued to look stronger the past couple of years with Central ascending, and you've got Liberty, Scotlandville, and Woodlawn in that group. Looking at that group of 6 teams starting with the Bears and Broncos, what's your outlook for that group and what you're watching from 4-5A?
I think it's going to be interesting to see how it develops because, obviously Catholic and Zachary, looking at them, are quite frankly, no-brainers because you expect them to be good. Both are established programs, and we all expect them to be there at the end of the year or late in the playoffs. There's no reason to think that won't be the case. Now, it's going to be a different look. It's like I told somebody the other day, there's no 6'7" Trades Green for Zachary to throw to this year, but trust me, they have plenty of targets. I saw him in 7-on-7, and Caleb Gonzalez is a dynamic quarterback. Now, he doesn't look anything like some of the blue chip quarterbacks we've had in the past, but he's very effective. He can run the ball. I liked his touch on the ball when I saw him this summer. He has a good knack for finding receivers, and on that day, he didn't actually have the first team guys there because several of them were at camps and doing other things, and that was the day that they had Catholic out there, St. Aug, and Carr for a little 7-on-7. So he afforded himself very well. And, they have some holes they're going to fill, but like I told somebody the other day, I said, Zachary expects to win. This is a program. It's truly next man up. And it's the same thing at Catholic. Now, there you have a 4-year starter, Daniel Beal, who's gone as your quarterback. But, they had Baylor Graves and Hunter Goldsmith that they alternated during the 7-on-7. They've got other weapons they can use. The defense with the Bradford brothers will be a thing to watch. And then, of course, their offensive lineman, or Smith, is already committed to Louisiana Tech. There's no reason to think they won't succeed. And, I said, yeah, but with a new quarterback. And I said, we got to understand they have some targets and they, again, afforded themselves very well that time I saw them this summer. They've got Amari Clayton. They've got Cohen LeBlanc. They've got guys in their receiver corps who already have college scholarship offers. So that's the kind of guys that can help your quarterback grow into a role as a starter. The rest of the district's going to be fun too. Scotlandville has one of the more intriguing athletes in Frizzell Shepherd, and it looks like they're kind of getting their footing and getting to where they need to be. Liberty will be interesting with Andy Boone, the new coach there, who is has made a reputation. He doesn't pass, he doesn't punt, he doesn't kick. So it worked very, very well at a couple of his other stops, and they see it as a way to forge some competitiveness. Central is the one that probably fits closer to the mold that you're talking about. I expect them to rebuild. You got Jackson Furman back at quarterback, and he's committed to Nichols. Everybody knows about DK Mays, the edge rusher who's committed to Houston. But they've got other guys. I saw them play last year. Yeah, they graduated some, but, DK's brother, KD, is a pretty good player and linebacker. Now, physically, they're not very similar. But, again, you're looking at a situation where you're in a program. The team that's going to be intriguing to watch will be Woodlawn in the mix with the new coach in Scott Pellegrin. He's brought in a good staff around him. And, they have some talent there that remains. Of course, now you're going to be breaking in a new quarterback since Mr. Brownfield moved on to Miami Edison. But it looks like, there's a degree of excitement there. They're ready to jump into this season and see what happens.
Yeah, it'll be fun for sure. As you mentioned, as many eyes as will be on Catholic and Zachary. Central showed last year that they are on their way. Ascending into one of the top teams in the state, and we've seen some flashes from some of those other programs. So looking forward to 4-5A for sure. And the biggest district in not only New Orleans, but I think a very well-respected district around the state that everybody knows to look for year in and year out, and that's the Catholic League up in 5A. District 9, 5A, full of heavy hitters. You have the traditional Catholic League teams, the Rummels, Brother Martin, Holy Cross, back up in that group in recent years. Jesuit, John Curtis, who's been there for quite a while now. St. Aug, Edna Carr, who joined more recently, and now Warren Easton into that mix and just further bolsters that group. Looking at that 9-5A that is always as competitive as any league in the state, what should folks be watching from that group that it should be a lot of fun on Thursday, Friday, and Saturdays again this year?
Again, I think if you're talking Catholic League, you kind of got to start with Carr. They bringing back a ton of guys. I've been saying for, I don't know, probably a season or two that this group that they have right here is going to be a serious group to deal with, like the 2026 group. And they got a lot of guys coming back. John Johnson, Teron Francis. I don't even know if I really need to name all the names, but I could literally name their entire starting unit on both sides because everybody's that good. So, like I said, you got to kind of start with them and kind of filter on down from there, I think.
Yeah, you got 3 LSU commits now since Aiden's commitment recently. So him and Big Rich in the 26 class, Teron in the 25 class. You mentioned John at the helm of that offense, who has some experience, obviously, the last couple of years, comes back. It'll be his second year full-time starting. And so I know they're excited about having last year under his belt and now being able to kind of take off at the helm of it this year. That group, though, I mean, St. Aug, Valdez, back to the high school ranks, has been successful everywhere he's been as he takes over St. Aug. Curtis is Curtis. You have to keep an eye on them every year. Rummel came on strong down the stretch last year, returns a lot. Brother Martin was a young team last year, was competitive. So I know Carr, I think in both of our minds, is probably the top team to watch, but is this going to be another year where and I say all this without mentioning Holy Cross, who was the 1 seed in that division in the playoffs last year, and now in Coach Watney's second year at the helm. Is it going to be another, slugfest week in, week out between a lot of these teams?
Yeah, I think it is. Even as good as I thought Carr, was last year, it was still a battle pretty much every week. Holy Cross, Brother Martin, I want to say, Rummel gave him probably the best game. And I didn't quite expect that because I hadn't seen a ton of Rummel up until that point. But it looks like, they'll be back. I know they bring back Kendrick Joseph. I think he was one guy that really caught my eye last year at receiver. He had a really good game against Carr. And I want to say I saw them another time or two. St. Aug is bringing back like a bunch of guys because, kind of going back through this, looking through some of the names, or looking through the roster, I was just kind of looking for names that I remember coming back. And I was hitting on a bunch of guys with them. Like their receiving group is going to be really good. Same with Brother Martin. They got like 3 or 4 like really, really good young receivers coming back. Their quarterbacks coming back. So I'm kind of wondering if they'll let Hudson Fields maybe get a few snaps in there. But like I said, Dezette's coming back, so I'm sure he'll be kind of entrenched in that starting role. But they've got like the receivers I mentioned, Trishun Ware, I think that's how you pronounce his first name, but he plays like both sides. He was a real problem last year. So the whole Catholic League is going to be really good, probably from top to bottom.
Warren Easton is a team that we've watched for years in 4A be as steadily competitive as anybody, and they make that jump up into this league now after last year was such a roller coaster where you saw some flashes of the potential they had, but then they kept running into different dynamics and had the end of the season shut down. What are your expectations or excitement or whatever it may be for the Eagles now getting back into what we hope is a more normal year and also hitting now a schedule that includes this gauntlet, and just kind of what do you hope to see from them?
Yeah, they were one of the teams where I did get to see them in spring, and I think they're gonna probably bring back have Carl Reed at quarterback, but he's kind of a smaller kid, but I think he seems like he has a pretty good handle on the offense. But they're really gonna rely on their running game again. They usually have like 2 or 3 shifty, speedy backs, and they got that again. Thomas Vaughn has been playing since he was a freshman, and he's gonna be a junior this year. Terrell Sertan, I think he'll be back, and he was really, really good his freshman year, and I think maybe he played like 1 or 2 games last year. I don't know if it was an eligibility thing or whatever, but I think he'll be back, and they're gonna lean on those 2 a lot. I think they got a really good linebacking core too. Jaden Phillips is Jerry's son, and he looked really good in the spring game. I think I want to say he's class of 2026, so I would probably be on the lookout for him. And I think they use him some at running back too. Like Jerry just does all kind of stuff, so he might throw him back there. He's just gonna do some fun stuff. So that's really why I like covering Easton too. And of course Jalen Chapman at O-line. So
another LSU commit recently, the the early 2026 LSU commits all around New Orleans, 3 of them in that district alone. District 3-5A that kind of stretches across the 3-3-7. I talked to Chaston Tavares from out in Lake Charles about his 3, but you have the heavy hitters in your backyard there with Acadiana, who was back in the Dome last year, Karen Crow, Lafayette High, New Iberia, and Southside. And that has been such a fun district, particularly for the Lafayette area teams in recent years. When you look at what 2024 may hold from the Wrecking Rams on through the group, what are you watching from that district?
Yeah, I mean, of course, Acadiana had one of the most, I guess, unprecedented type of runs to get to the Superdome. They had to go to New Orleans on 3 separate occasions, of course, also in the championship game. But them having to, do that, it built up a level of resiliency for those guys. And, they want to right their wrongs. They played against a very talented Catholic team in that championship game, and they just want to, get things back correct. They want to go back to the Superdome, and they want to finish what they started. They've got Caden Dibetta coming back. They've got guys like Russell Babineau, and so many others. That's a very experienced team, and they feel like because they are so experienced, it's not a whole lot of install. It's not a whole lot of, trying to set up a new scheme or anything like that. It's really just a refresher. You're coming in and you already have something built, and you're trying to get your guys going very early on. But then you also, like you said, you have a team in Karen Crow where Tony Corville was the head coach last season. He's now retired. You have Gavin Peters to step in, who's been on the staff for years. And so it's going to be a lot of the same things that we've seen. A very talented program, a very talented team, great guys there with a rich tradition, a championship tradition as well. But then you have, teams in there. Southside has a new head coach in Jess Curtis, who has a, long history of winning from his time when he was back at Manning High School. So he comes here to make a new challenge and try to continue to ascend that Southside program. I think it was 2 seasons ago they won District 3-5A when they knocked off, I think, Karen Crow and Acadiana in both of those games that season. So they're not going to be any slight to anybody. So that will, probably be those 3 main teams in the mix that are, near the top that are making the most noise. You also have a team in Nish that's, trying to get their program steered in the right direction under Josh Learman. They have a running back in Shanga Charles, who was all district running back. And he said that he kind of compared himself to Marshawn Lynch in the way that he plays. So it'll be interesting to see, what that district will be able to turn out to be. But I'm ultimately looking for, teams like Acadiana, Karen Crow, and Southside to really stand out and get things rolling for the year.
And I mean, we don't have to spend a ton of time on this, but you mentioned the 2 coaching changes with Gavin Peters taking over at Karen Crow and some of the, I guess, the continuity that comes there because of his experience there with the kids and then with him and all of those things. Jess comes south for the first time all the way down to Southside. What does that transition look like, I guess? He comes with obviously a huge track record to him. You expect Southside to be, in that top of the district mix right off the bat, with the new coaching staff there, or is it going to be any sort of a growing pains type transition? I know they don't want that either way, yeah. But what's kind of your outlook for what that transition looks like?
Yeah, I think just with Jess's mentality, that's going to rub off on the kids. A winner's mentality is very, something that people want to latch themselves to. They want to attach themselves to winners. So when they see that there is a proven winner as their leader, they're going to want to play hard for him. They're going to want to, go out there and score more touchdowns, get more turnovers and things of that nature to make sure that they are in the playoff picture and maybe even making a deep, playoff run. I think that, him coming in, it's definitely going to be an opportunity for him to kind of cement himself in 3 different places, doing it at a small school like Manny, going up to Natchitoches Central, and then now trying to do it here at Southside.
That Lafayette contingent has been so tough in District 3-5A, but you've got Barb Sulphur and Sam Houston in there, and Sam Houston in particular has come on strong in recent years and kind of opened some eyes at times. When you look at that 3-5A district, and particularly those Lake Charles area teams, what are your expectations for them and where they are going into the season?
Yeah, look, that's one of the toughest districts, I think, in that 5A. I mean, the Lafayette schools just absolutely dominated as of late. Look, it's going to be interesting for the three big schools here in Lake Charles in the surrounding area. I mean, look, Sulphur, they're going to have – it was a tough first year for Coach Geringer and gang over at Sulphur. Look, they've got a lot of experience coming back from last year on the defensive side of the football. I think it's like 7 returning starters defensively. Offense has got a good crew coming back. They're going to have to figure out the quarterback position, I think. But, I mean, they've got the running back, Joe Bear, back. They've also got J.D. LaFleur, LSU commit, coming back for Sulphur. They're going to be an interesting they're going to have an interesting season. I think it's going to take it may take another year or so for Coach Geringer to really get things rolling there in Sulphur, but there's no doubt he'll get it rolling. Look, Barb, that's an interesting team for me. Jalandon Gray, the quarterback, got thrown into an unprecedented situation last year and really was thrown to the wolves in the Jamboree. We were there doing the Jamboree, and he got thrown into the wolves, and you're like, okay, like we've got a freshman. Well, now he's a sophomore, and he was pretty good last year. They're one of my sleeper teams, but they've got a really tough schedule, and especially when you play in that district where you're playing 7 district games. It's going to be an interesting year. Look, they've got Eric Jones, who ran over, 1,000 yards last year, 14 touchdowns. He's pretty darn good. I think they have a better year. The big test, I think, is going to be them and LCCP, who always is going to have athletes. I think they play in week 3. Sam Houston's the one, man. They are. I have really high expectations for them. For me, it's the defense is going to be the question mark. I think they have to replace 7 key pieces starter-wise on the defensive side of the football. But offensively, my goodness, there may not be – that's one of the best offenses in the entire state. You've got everybody back. Everything from Cole Flanagan at the tight end spot, Aiden Rose, the Stout twins at quarterback and receiver. Both running backs are back. Those guys are going to be awesome. They were awesome last year. They kind of run into a tough brick wall in the first round of the playoffs with Mandeville last year on a rainy night. When you pass the football a lot, well, good luck playing in the rain. But look, I have really high expectations for Sam Houston. They have a chance. I'm not saying they will. They have a chance to really compete in that district and finish towards the top again.
It'll be fun to watch. I mean, we talked about it, some of what Sam Houston did last year, and then they happened to run into a bad night, a bad matchup with a Mandeville team that was playing as well as anybody at that time of year. But certainly keep an eye on.
Shepard was that running back's name, wasn't it?
Yeah, Nate Shepard, who is unreal.
I did that game, and he, boy, good luck. They had a time stopping him.
Yeah, as did most teams last year, and he'll be back this year. So I know a lot of teams will have trouble stopping him again in 2024 with the 5A group. That is that area of the state, always so much fun, so much competitive parity year in and year out, and teams that love to upset one another, play spoiler at times and whatnot. And that fun district is now split into 2 fun 5A districts this year. And that's kind of a big storyline for you on the North Shore area. And so I guess looking first at that 6-5A group, the western half of, your coverage area where you have Covington with Hammond and Mandeville, Ponchatoula, and St. Paul's. And so a lot of teams that you are super familiar with in terms of actual coverage responsibilities, and some teams from a little bit further west that by the nature of the district, you've gotten pretty familiar with as well. When you look at that group and the expectations for this year, what are you watching? What are you seeing from those 5 teams?
Yeah, I think 6-5A, the 6-5A that we have now, the Western District, is really tough. I mean, Mandeville's coming back from the semifinal run. St. Paul's is always good. I'm going to believe in Covington this year. They had a really rough injury last year. And then you put in those 2 Tangy schools, even with the new coach at Ponchatoula, who's new but been with the system. And Hammond really gets, I don't want to say screwed, but really draws a short stick in this district, because they are a much better team than they were 3 years ago when I started doing this full time. And they are just in a murderer's row district. I mean, when I look at the 6-5A district, I'm so high on St. Paul's and Mandeville that I have to almost check myself all the time, because we all know what Nate Shepard did last year in the playoffs. He was incredible. That the performance at Airline was insane, and he's only gotten better, and that team's only gotten deeper. And Ben Hendricks is back at quarterback, who started late last year, but is only a junior. He's going to be really good. So that whole team is just excited, and they're not going to sneak up on anybody. But literally, their longest road trip is to Ponchatoula this season. So they're not going anywhere. So they're going to have a chance to really grow all season long, which is insane to me. And then St. Paul's is so good all the time. They do such an amazing job there. Kenny Sears, and that team is always tough. And then they bring back a quarterback who's never lost in district, and they bring back a pair of running backs who are really good. And they seem like they are, what was that? 2 years ago, they made the semifinals with a great defense. And I think their defense will be good, but I think this offense can actually be very solid to good. And if you pair those two things together, St. Paul's is a team no one wants to face. And then Covington has a bunch of talent back. They've got a new quarterback, but he played safety last year, so he's familiar with things. Kalen Williams is back off of an ankle injury. He's a really great back. They've got all their offensive line back, so I think Greg Salter, after missing the playoffs last year, should have no problem, A, making it, and B, probably being pretty good. And then you put in those two Tangi teams, which are, Ponchatoula is going to have to replace Bishop Davis. That's a big ask, but you have to replace great athletes every year. They have a great program there. And like I said, Hammond has more athletes than I know what to do with. They're just in a district that's full of teams that also are very talented and very well coached. So, week in and week out, it's tough. But the thing that I like about splitting up the districts, and I've talked to so many coaches about this, is that it makes scheduling for PowerPoints easier. And that's not, whether it's good or bad, it's going to help your team in the playoffs, right? So now you go from a 7-game slate to a 4-game slate, and you can do what you want out of district. St. Paul's is playing U-High, which is going to be a great game in week 5. They're keeping some of the traditional rivalries. Mandeville's still playing Fontainebleau, the battle for the Little Brown Jug, which is actually in district, now moves to week 10, which I think benefits both of those teams, because I can't think of a better tune-up for the playoffs than Covington St. Paul's in week 10. Like, I just can't think of a better atmosphere to get both of those teams ready to play in the playoffs. So I think, when I look at that district, Mandeville and St. Paul's, really, I got to check myself. But those are two teams that I expect to be covering a game Thanksgiving week. Like, I really expect to be out there, still covering these teams, because I think they're that talented on all levels.
I know just from doing some of these other little previews around the state that there's not going to be a lot of people excited to hear that Mandeville is potentially deeper and going to have a chance to grow throughout this season, including recording the Shreveport area and talking about Airline and how great their season was going until they met Mr. Nate Shepard.
That kid is just incredible. I mean, you and I have both done this for a long time. We've seen a lot of great athletes, but he comes from such a great family. He's so smart. He's going to be graduating in December. He should be making his commitment probably this week, he told me. And when you look at his schools, it's like Cal and Tulane and Duke. It's all a bunch of smart kid schools, right? So he's graduating early. He's going to quote unquote smart kid school, and he's a great athlete, and he's a smart kid. And his brother's going to do great things at Colorado this season too. I really think, he did so much good work at Vanderbilt. So he just amazes me every time. And he's one of those kids, and you and I have done this before, but like, polished, right? Like, you go talk to some kids and they're like, I don't know what to say. And this kid's like, he's got 2 quotes in the bag, and then he comes up with something smart at the end. And he's just so polished in the media training. And then you look at him on the field and he's so polished there. And you just think, I wish I was this smart when I was 18 years old, all around.
Yeah. You mentioned polished, smart, all these things. And he can seem, I guess, kind of quiet or mild mannered at times because he's got it all together in a lot of ways. And he is as feisty and fierce of a competitor as there is in the state, who I think gets in this great 2025 running back class in Louisiana. He gets overlooked a little bit, and he wears that chip on his shoulder in a big way, and really enjoyed, opening some eyes and putting people on notice a little bit through that great run last year. And so now getting ready for senior year, I'm expecting more of the same. It's going to be fun watching him and the Skippers. And as you mentioned, that whole 6-5A district with a lot of really capable teams. And we alluded the the district splits, and so the east half where you get the Slide L teams, including Salmon coming up from 4A, and Fontainebleau over there with Salmon, Slide L, North Shore, and Chalmette, a district champion last year with some South Shore teams, makes a move up to join these North Shore guys. When you look at the outlook for 7-5A, what do you see from that group? Imagining some similarities in terms of there's an opportunity for some level of parity, but a couple of teams may be standing out.
Yeah, I mean that's the most wide open district I think in 5A, maybe in the whole state. Chalmette won their district last year. They lost a whole bunch of 27 seniors, 20 starters. That's a lot to replace. Salmon, they have so much talent. They have so much speed, but moving up to 5A is a whole different animal. I think I talked to Coach Shooter for a preview, and he said, well, the biggest thing we're working on is depth because we can't play 7 linemen. And he's right. If they're able to find 9-10 linemen, they'll be really, really, really good. It's just a matter of if they're able to do that. North Shore graduated that huge class. They're coming off of back-to-back playoff wins. So it'll be curious to see how quickly they can sort of replace those leaders that were on that team that were, part of that sort of renaissance they've had over there. Slide L's got a new coach. They've got a bunch of babies on that team. This is probably a year where they're going to end up just growing. I mean, they're going to start 10 sophomores, and it's hard to win at the 5A level starting 10 sophomores. It is what it is. But I think they're in the right track. Coach Page is doing a good job as he motivating those kids and getting them to grow up. And then I think Fontainebleau is a great X factor in this district. Is that Johnny Kavanaugh does a great job. He's a smart coach. They got Brendan Obey, the transfer from Hannon, who had 1,500 yards last year rushing. He's a legit running back. He made that team infinitely better. And you talked about Nate having a chip on his shoulder. Obey's got a huge chip on his shoulder. He is ready to prove that he can do what he did last year at the 5A level. And there's no better coach in the state to use his talents than Kavanaugh. I mean, he's going to be tremendous in that offense. They've got their quarterback back. They've got a tremendous wide receiver in Sebastian Miller. They just lack for depth. If they have any sort of injuries, it's going to be tough on Fontainebleau if they come at the wrong position. So I think that's sort of the story of the district, right? I feel like every team in there, I can make an argument, hey, this is how they win. And then I also in the same breath say, well, this is how they, struggle, whether they can't replace their starters, whether they have injuries at key positions, whether they, just have to grow up and they don't quite grow up as quickly as you think they would. North Shore is an example of that. They play Curtis in week 2. And I asked Bobby Sanders, you should probably fire this coach who did all this scheduling. He goes, yeah, I should probably fire that guy and shave his beard too. I mean, I don't know what he's doing with a big beard, right? I mean, it's just one of those things where it's just every team has a question mark. And it's going to be really interesting to watch because all of these teams are well coached and they all have a hole somewhere that sticks out on paper. But they all have a great strength somewhere that you say, if they take advantage of that, they're going to run away with things. So it's just a matter of how that district shakes out. I'll give you the little sneak peek. In my preview tab, I picked Chalmette to win the district, but I could easily see Salmon winning this district. I could easily see North Shore if they survive the early part of their schedule without getting too down on themselves, or maybe sneaking a win out, or being competitive. All of a sudden they get in the district, they go on a run. And then Fontainebleau, if they stay healthy, that offense can put up points. So it's just those 4 teams, put them in a box, shake them out. You can make an argument for any of them winning the district.
With that District 8-5A, a mix of some of the River Parish teams, as well as further down the Bayou. And in the true River Parish group, you have Destrehan, that obviously a state championship a couple of years ago and still very talented. East St. John, that has battled them as well as anyone the last couple of years. And then Hanville with the new coach, Greg Boyne, who knows that Destrehan program extremely well, obviously taking the reins over across the river. What are you seeing from that group, Destrehan, East St. John, and Hanville, as we start 2024?
Well, let's start with Destrehan, right? And you're talking about, the health scare with Marcus Scott a year ago. He wasn't able to finish out the year with the team physically. And ironically, Greg Boyne kind of took over there at the end. But Coach Scott is back healthy. And I saw something the other day. I think it was 14-0 Productions put up the senior classes that have The senior class at Destrehan hasn't lost a regular season game. It's incredible what Destrehan has done in the regular season, not just during the Marcus Scott era, but back when I covered him in the Steve Robichaux era. Same thing. They would go 10-0 almost every year in the regular season and make deep runs. So again, they're loaded, right? You know, they got. I'm sure you covered, obviously, with all the recruiting you do with Thomas and Philip Wright and their dual announcement, and then Philip had to switch and go join Thomas at LSU. Hey, listen to this story just the other day. So I live in Destrehan. So the sports pub, if you coming on the airline, you take the left to go into Destrehan. So the sports pub's literally right behind me. Like when the cooks go out to smoke out the back door, that's my back door. I'm like, hey, you got the special. Anyway, so I went over there. So I had lunch with Frank Monica and Jason Dewey, and they're back for a third year of their podcast, Let's Be Frank. And while we're there, here comes Jace Thomas and his dad, Fred Thomas. I'm like, could it get any more River Parish football than this? And coach is looking at it, and Jace is, he looks like a Division I, football player. Funny story with him. He played soccer, my daughter's first sports team. She played on the same team with him when they were 4. And Emma's first venture into sports, she quit 2 games into it. Quit. I don't want soccer, Dad. I'm out. So luckily, and I'll brag as a dad, she's an all-state setter now at Mount Carmel. So it worked out for her. But so you think about it. So Thomas, right, in the defensive back, they're loaded. Wide receivers galore over there with Philip Wright leading the charge, and there's so many other guys, right? Mack, Wilford, Thiel, the fourth. But Jackson Fields, man, I don't know if you've seen this guy play in person. My next door neighbor over here played in JV and was the backup quarterback. I'm like, aren't you going to get any time? He's like, this other guy, Jackson's pretty good. And then we see how good he is. He's literally one of the best drop back straight passers in the state of Louisiana. So, I really think Destrehan's, ready for another run. And I think it starts with them. So we bring up Greg Boyne, right? Hanville's new head coach after 21 years at Destrehan. The thing I didn't know, because he just obviously bleeds Destrehan football, he's a Hanville grad. Hanville you know that? I did not know that.
Yeah, not until all of this came up with the coaching opportunity over there.
Yeah, so he is a Hanville grad, and again, his daughters both played volleyball and beach volleyball with my daughter, so we became friends that way. Greg Boyne's wife also is a big volleyball player. But look, they got a quarterback situation over there as well as St. James, and I know we'll talk about them in a little while. Nakhan and Teague. All right, Nakhan is the junior. He's going to start tonight in the scrimmage, ironically enough, against St. James. And then Teague, he's a sophomore. Coach Boyne says you're going to see him at the Jamboree. And I said, is there a leader in the clubhouse? He goes, I'll tell you after the Jamboree. So he's literally going to wait to make that quarterback call in week 1. And I know, again, with your recruiting, CJ Smith, who committed to Southeastern, very talented running back, but kind of under the radar. I hadn't heard a lot about him. And I asked Coach Boyne about him today. He said he's not going to play today, but he is very good. And he's not the only one. Like Hanville and Destrehan always seem to have 3 talented tailbacks. And according to Coach Boyne, that's the case this year as well. So you think about it, under Coach Luquette the last 2 years, not Hanville-esque seasons, right? Under 500 the last 2 years. And, Coach Luquette, obviously, he's a Destrehan guy, right? He graduated from Destrehan, was a quarterback, and just like Coach Boyne, an offensive coordinator, a quarterback coach before he went on to Woodlawn and then came back to Hanville. But I really think Hanville gets back on track this year, Jarrett, and has a winning season. And it's not going to take long, I think, for Coach Boyne to kind of implement, his offensive skills and, the great talent that program has. I think they make a run as well.
Good deal. And East St. John, have you had a chance to stop by them recently? What's kind of the outlook for them? They've been a team that's kind of right there, had some nice regular seasons, had a chance a couple years ago to make a little bit of a playoff run. I know they have some key guys to replace. How much do you know about the Wildcats right now in that district?
Well, just looking back, we talked about Destrehan, being the senior class undefeated in the regular season. The one team that's really come close, right? Hahnville and Destrehan, like the great tradition. Hahnville hasn't won against Destrehan since Puka in 2017. So, that rivalry has been one-sided. East St. John really has been the threat for Destrehan to lose a game in district play. Brandon Brown, I think they started 7-0 last year, and they always seem to have a really good start, and then you just kind of, hit the wall late. And, when I say hit the wall, you're playing in that District 8-5A. There's just, monsters like the Catholic League each week, it seems like. So, Brandon Brown does have a lot of guys to replace. I have not made it over there yet. We absolutely will with, again, the new show, and I appreciate you mentioning it. Up the river, down the bayou. Can you tell we just started? But, I have absolutely loved what Brandon Brown has done. Gone to, a practice every year, even though we haven't done River Parish football since 2019, the website, I make an annual Thanksgiving Day run, a tour around the river parishes for teams that are still alive. And there's always like 4 or 5 teams. And I go to Destrehan first at 7 a.m. for some donuts. And, they have their little tradition, St. Charles, and so I make it right down Airline Highway and stop and reserve at East St. John. And Brandon Brown just conducts himself so well. I'm such a fan of him and what he's been able to do. And I just wish that team success in the postseason. It's hard to believe that team has only won, one state championship. All the years with Ryan Perilou and what he was able to do, think about it. 1980 is the only time they won a state championship. Timmy Bird, the basketball coach, was the quarterback of that team. Phil Greco was the coach who went on to be the head coach at Nichols and the AD at Rummel. But I root for East St. John. I don't have a whole lot of knowledge this year of the current roster, but I'm pulling for Coach Brown.
For you, Central Lafourche, HL, Terrebonne, and Thibodaux are kind of the primary teams that you're pretty consistently on top of. I think at times they've kind of opened some eyes in recent years. HL with some of the talent they've had coming through, including Tyron Winslow, who's now committed to SMU, Terrebonne, and some of the talent they have coming through under Coach TY and on down the list. Take me through kind of what you're seeing from some of those Bayou teams in that 8-5A district as the season approaches.
Well, just like every year, I always say that, this 8-5A district, it's sort of like the old SEC West of LHSAA football. I mean, it's really loaded. I know there's a lot of great programs in 5A across the state, but like you just mentioned, Destrehan, Hahnville, East St. John, Terrebonne, those programs have consistently made the playoffs. Destrehan has won championships. They've contended for state titles. They've won district championships, put out some really great recruits, LSU's, Alabama's, all over the place. I expect similar this year. It's not going to fall apart. From top to bottom, it's still going to be a very competitive district, a very tough district that you're going to see a lot of these teams going to make deep playoff runs. In my opinion, it still starts with Destrehan. You got to give them their credit. I've been around here for like 27 years, and I can't remember, when Destrehan has had a really bad season or a rebuilding year. They just reload and just keep going, But you're going to see the same thing again with Destrehan. They have so many great athletes and so many great weapons. But for the Bayou schools that have to go against the Hahnvilles and the Destrahans and East St. John's, they've consistently played with them. Thibodaux, Terrebonne. They a couple of years ago, Terrebonne gave Destrehan a couple of good matchups, and Thibodaux has done the same. Now, as far as Thibodaux and Terrebonne can win a district championship, it may be a challenge, because Destrehan is really so good. And then Hahnville, I know they got some new blood coming through there with a new coaching staff. I think East St. John, Coach Brandon Brown always has great athletes, and they're always on the right there on the edge to taking that next step, and continuing, making it to the Superdome. And but Coach Brown has done a great job with so many great athletes at East St. John. But for the Bayou, I think we're still going to have some really good teams. You mentioned Terrebonne. Terrebonne has been up there. You look at the number of athletes that they put out in the college ranks the last 5 years. Mason Smith, Ja'Kai Douglas, Jalen Lucas before he moved to New Orleans from the Hurricane. And then you see recently with Kylan Billiat, the receiver now at LSU. Talon Bingham, he's coming here to Nichols, and he's a really good defensive lineman. They put out some good talent at Terrebonne the last 5-10 years, and they got another good little crop coming up. They got some, really big recruits that, are in that system, and, the coaching staff is doing a good job of helping them get exposure. So Terrebonne, last year Terrebonne played Destrehan pretty well on the road, and I think it was a close game into the fourth quarter. Now, they may have lost a tough game at the end to Thibodeau that kind of hurt them from getting the home playoff game. But Terrebonne has shown they can compete with Destrahans and Harmvilles and East St. John's in the district. Thibodeau under Dre Troscalera, who's a really good coach. He's been around the state, Ascension Catholic, and I think Lehigh and Baton Rouge and Plaquemine. He's won, a lot of games, and he's won some playoff games. He's worked with some really good football players at each one of those stops. So Coach Dre Troscalera is getting into his second year at Thibodeau. And, one thing about Dre is, I've noticed that each one of his stops that first year is kind of him getting established, him, seeing the talent that they have and starting to implement his way of doing things, his style of things. And now into his second year, a full year at Thibodeau, I think Thibodeau can definitely make some, steps towards becoming the traditional Thibodeau team that we've seen with Kyron Lacey's and the Meek Robertsons and, and so on. So they don't have a lot of big name stars that, are getting recruits right now, but I think after working here in Lafourche Parish the last couple of years, I've seen some of the middle school talent that they've got coming in, and next couple of years, Thibodeau is going to be, if they can keep those guys together and keep them healthy, they can definitely make a run at something. H.L. Bourgeois, you mentioned Winslow. I mean, they got some beef on the lines. Him and Kentra Lacey, offensive lineman. They got some beef on the line. The question is if they can get the skill position together, get established at quarterback. I know they had to replace their quarterback this year. They have H.L. Bourgeois has always had talent. They've crossed that hall. That's one of the biggest schools here in the Bayou area. And the question is, if they can get them out there, consistently ready to play every week, keep them healthy. And last year was a disappointment for them. They only won 2 games, I think. They kind of expected to take that next step, with all that talent they have there. So now this year it's a whole new season, and I think you mentioned Tyron. I mean, he's really really underrated, across the state. I know he's going to SMU, but I don't think a lot of people really know how good he is, and hopefully this year they can see that. Same thing with Lacey. He's a really big guy. And Central Lafourche, that program has just struggled with some consistency lately, especially with the coaching position. I know they had a couple coaches come and go, but now Shelly Bedros has stepped in as the coach. He's going into his second year. So hopefully now that they have some kind of coaching consistency there, the players can buy into what the coaches want to do. And last year they won 1 game, I think, which was great for those players. Last couple of years, I think the year before that, maybe the last 2 years, they went 0-10, had a long losing streak. So just getting that win kind of gave them some kind of momentum to build towards the future. And that's just the key. They might not win 3, 4, 5 games, but, they could just take those small steps towards building things. That's going to be big for Coach Bedros and the Central Lafourche this year.
Yeah, keeping an eye on all 4 of those teams, kind of piecing together, as you mentioned, kind of different degrees of progress and all trying to, like everyone in that district, catch up to Destrehan with the way things have been going for Destrehan the last couple of years. This 5A district that feels like it's got about 1 million teams up there in 1-5A, and that group is, for folks that are less familiar, and I mean, we're in a redistricting process, so maybe folks are still kind of catching up, but Airline, Benton, Bird, Captain Shreve, Evangel making the jump up back to 5A, Houghton, Huntington, Natchitoches Central, and Parkway. And I don't know where you want to start. It's always a really competitive group and just adds some more fuel to the fire with a resurgent Evangel team in there. But what are your thoughts as you try to make some sense of what to expect from 1-5A in 2024?
I think the first thought is, who's the bad team? Southwood went down, and I'm not trying to dog Southwood, but I mean, the record speaks for itself. The numbers, they were up against it numbers wise, so they had a rough time. But who is it now? I mean, that district is stacked. Evangel, obviously, the big buzz coming up is Evangel, but let's not forget the teams that have been really good. We got to start with Airline. Certainly, I believe you could view it as an upset that they did not win district last year. Heck of a season by Captain Shreve, rolled the table for the first time in school history. But Airline just seemed like if there was going to be a team that made a deep run, it could be Airline. And, the one thing that came back to bite them, which had during the year, even though they won some of the games, was defense. I mean, and point out that they got eliminated in the playoffs, even though they scored 50 points. So Airline's going to score some points. Ben Taylor, Kenny Darby, they're going to score 50 a night, it seems like. And Ben Taylor led the state with 4,100 yards, 49 touchdowns, something like that. So it all starts, I think, with Airline's offense. But can Airline stop some people this year? Because there's going to be a lot of offenses that are going to score some points. That leads us to Evangel. What are they going to do? I mean, they're back in 5A. They've got the talent, but they certainly are going to have more players, more turnover on their roster than anybody else. And what week is everybody going to be eligible? I know Pop Houston, the greatest quarterback that hasn't made a high school start yet. You've seen him play as much as anybody with 7-on-7. So the accolades and the hype seems to be real. Talking to Brock Berlin, who's working with him at Evangel now, he's like, he is the real deal. But, Pastor Denny Duran says we got about 17 receivers. So how is that gelling? I mean, seriously, how is that gelling in the off season? Because who's getting 1 reps, right? How many guys can you possibly get 1 reps with Pop? And how is that going to evolve? I think we're going to see Evangel. I think we're going to see a much different team in week 5 than maybe we see in week 1 with Evangel. But with all that talent, all the guys that came from everywhere, which I'm still not sure who is all there. When I see that week 1 roster, I'm certainly going to pay attention to it. But they're going to be a force come the second half of the year. Maybe not necessarily in a district race, because with all those teams, district starts early. But Evangel, that's the team to watch, not necessarily the best team.
And again, there's so many solid teams in that group, and you hit on obviously Airline and Evangel, a little bit of Captain Shreve and the success they had last year. Bird has, folks have in recent years caught up to Bird in a way that they hadn't in a while, and given them some tough weeks and tough seasons by their standards. But is there a team in that group that maybe folks outside the Shreveport area would be surprised to see some of the potential there that they could, whether it be, and most of that district schedule is a district schedule, but I guess by the time you get to playoff time, that maybe folks around the state don't know as much about, but could surprise them because there's a lot of potential there?
Well, first I want to make sure I'm not throwing Shreve out. I may have sounded like that, but they're up. They have some challenges this year. First year head coach Jeremy Wilburn. They lost Jamarlin Otis. They lost Devin Harper. LSU recruit, commit to Calvary, which I'm sure we'll talk about later. But they still have some good guys. Lionel Prudhomme, obviously Arkansas commit. They got some really good guys on defense. So they're good, but they've got some of the stuff we just talked about with Evangel, some turnover, some new guys. It's going to be tough. The team that really interests me is Parkway. Parkway's had a really good defense. They had Airline on the ropes last year. Nobody stopped Airline. Parkway was doing it for the better part of 3 quarters, and then things changed. One call really changed that game. Parkway just hasn't had the offense recently. I think they're going to get some more points this year, and they're going to be very good on defense. So if you're looking for a spoiler, and I'm not, it's not like Parkway's been bad, so they're not totally off the radar, but I think Parkway's going to be a little more balanced this year and maybe could, throw a wrench into things.
Yeah, Parkway is definitely an interesting team to me to watch for sure. And like you said, they've been good, but it seems like as much attention because of the playoff run of Airline last year and all those points, and because of all the talk of Pop and everything, that
Right.
Parkway is kind of flying under the radar a little bit from a statewide perspective. And in 5-5A, you have a Dutchtown team that made its deepest run in school history this past year, and a 5-5A group with the Livingston Parish and Ascension Parish teams that is consistently competitive, and each can kind of take their shots at one another on any given Friday night. And so that group is Denham Springs, Dutchtown, East Ascension, Live Oak, Sanamaw, and Walker. What's kind of the outlook from those teams, just east of Baton Rouge in 2024?
Well, what might surprise some people, it didn't necessarily surprise me. Walker, of course, made it to the quarterfinals for the first time in school history. And I send out a little questionnaire where coaches, they generally don't rank their own teams. They rank who they pick as the preseason choice to be the winner. And Walker was the choice. And, you think about it, they've got Troy Sylvie, the quarterback, who was solid last year, also a very good basketball player. You have Caden Jones out there, and Carly and Joseph is a good receiver for them, who basically kind of blossomed during basketball season too. He was a basketball MVP, kind of surprised everybody. And sometimes when a guy has a breakout year like that in one sport, it leads to things in other sports. So that's going to be a lot to shoulder. They're going to have certainly a lot of competition there. I mean, like you said, all of those other teams are very, very competitive. Keeping in mind, you got a new coach in Brock Mathern at East Ascension. Be interesting to see how that goes. Everybody knows about Bryson Martinez, the line commit, but you're going to see an interesting kind of deal there to see what they run offensively and defensively. I'm kind of curious about the offensive set and just see what they do with the athletes and play with them. Sanamaw returns 57 lettermen and a number of starters, and they're just always solid from top to bottom. You've got Cooper Babin back at quarterback, and some great players who are kind of dynamic playmakers there. We don't know as much about Dutchtown this year, although they do have Josh Lewis, the Missouri commitment, and they have a receiver, Andrew Fields, is committed to Northwestern State. But you're, looking at some new players in other positions. I think Lakeedron Harvey at running back could be a breakout player. He's got a sprinter speed. Saw that I think he picked up a Power 5 offer the other day, if I'm not mistaken. Miami.
Yeah, he's had a nice summer.
He's had a nice summer. And then they may be actually looking to throw the ball a little more this year, which would be interesting, which we have never really seen of Dutchtown very much over the years. Denham Springs kind of took a little bit of a step back after the quarterfinal appearance the year before, but they have Jerry Horn, the quarterback, back. They've got a couple of playmakers in the Goldmans, and they're going to kind of move guys, I think, all around the field. They always have decent size on the line, solid on defense. Got a new OC this year. It'll be interesting to see how they shuffle all those pieces and put them together. Live Oak also has a new coach, and he's going to coach. Leggett was a head coach at St. Thomas Aquinas, and they've got some guys who are up and coming too. But it'll also be interesting to see. It may take them the pre-district schedule to kind of figure out where everybody goes as a new coaching staff and see what happens from there.
Yeah, they're going to be a lot of fun to me to watch for the next couple of years with all of those, underclassmen they're on the rise with that new coaching staff. So keep an eye on them for the years to come for folks. You have that 10-5A that has a school that you're proud to represent, John Ehret, where you played.
They're going to probably win it all. That's my take. I think they'll just probably steamroll. No, I'm just not. But I think go ahead and finish it.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you played, just a few years ago, and we like to call them the Monsters of Marrero, and they are a team to watch, obviously, in 10-5A again. Their group is Bonneville, East Jefferson, LW Higgins, a Riverdale team that I think is going to be interesting to watch, has some more talent that I'm aware of right now than is typically the case for Riverdale over the last decade or so. And West Jefferson, is this from a district standpoint? I mean, an Errett-led league going into this year. I mean, what are your expectations for that school that, again, you proudly rep? And do you have any thoughts on any of these other potential spoilers along the way?
Yeah, I think you would lead with Everett just mostly because of what they've done over the last few years. But I think East Jeff, I kind of know a few kids over there. Dorian Hollins is kind of an interesting prospect over there. He's got like really good size, and I would think they'll probably use him on both sides of the ball, DN, tight end type of kid, wide receiver. But I would maybe keep an eye on him. West Jefferson, they usually have like a couple of like talented guys. Like I know they just produced Sean Nicholas, who was a wide receiver I was pretty big on. So I might, just kind of keep an eye on them, make sure they're not kind of creeping up on us too bad. So, but those kind of the guys I would look out for.
Huge thanks once again to everyone who shared their time, info, and outlooks on what should be another awesome Louisiana high school football season. Make sure you check out all of their work throughout the season, and make sure you subscribe to the Louisiana vs. All Y'all channel for more season preview content, weekly shows, interviews, and game footage. I think I speak for everyone when I say thanks so much for your passion and support of high school athletics around our state. Thanks so much for tuning in to the Louisiana vs. All Y'all channel, and until next time, y'all be well.